I sat in the HR office, staring at the desk while Brenda's voice hammered against my skull. Her face was red, veins visible at her temples, and she was screaming that they were docking my pay until I apologized publicly to Tyler for making him uncomfortable. Tyler sat there in the corner chair, smirking like he'd already won. My hands shook in my lap, but I said nothing. I knew what really happened in the break room 2 days ago. I knew what Tyler actually did, and I knew something else too. Something I discovered last week in the financial files no one thought I could access. Brenda slammed her palm on the desk and I flinched despite myself. She slid a paper across the wood surface, the movement sharp and deliberate. It was an official pay reduction notice, printed on company letterhead, with my name at the top and numbers that made my stomach drop. Effective immediately. 30% reduction. I stared at the document and felt the room tilt slightly. Tyler finally spoke, his voice dripping with fake innocence. I just want to feel safe at work, you know? Is that too much to ask? My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. I wanted to scream at him, to tell Brenda what really happened, to expose him right there. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way Brenda was looking at Tyler with almost maternal sympathy. Maybe it was the way she wouldn't even meet my eyes. Maybe it was the cold calculation forming in my mind. Brenda leaned back in her chair, her expression softening as she looked at Tyler, then hardening again when she turned to me. You have until Friday to make a public apology at the all-staff meeting. Until then, this pay reduction stands. And if you refuse, Kari, this becomes permanent. Do you understand me? I nodded once. My throat was too tight to speak anyway. You're dismissed, Brenda said, waving her hand like she was shooing away a fly. I stood on legs that felt like water and walked out. The hallway seemed impossibly long. My coworkers' faces blurred as I passed their desks. Someone asked me a question, but the words sounded like they were coming from underwater. I made it to my own desk in the accounts payable department and sat down hard in my chair. Amy, who sat in the cubicle next to mine, rolled her chair over. What happened? You look awful. I couldn't speak. I just shook my head and turned to my computer, hoping she'd take the hint. She squeezed my shoulder once and rolled back to her own space. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and opened my banking app. I did the math in my head 3 times, hoping I was wrong. I wasn't. With a 30% pay reduction, my next paycheck would barely cover groceries. Rent was due in 12 days. My student loan payment was due in 15. I had maybe $300 in savings. The panic rose in my chest like floodwater. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to think clearly. I minimized the banking app and opened my personal encrypted drive, the one I kept on a cloud service under a different name. The files were all there. 8 months of evidence, $200,000 in fraudulent payments, shell companies, fake vendor invoices, approval signatures from Brenda and Douglas, the CFO. I'd been documenting it for 3 weeks, ever since I first noticed the pattern. Let me back up. 2 days ago, I was alone in the break room during the afternoon lull. Most people were either at lunch or in meetings. I was making coffee, just standing there waiting for the machine to finish brewing, when Tyler walked in. Tyler is the boss's son, 26 years old, never had to work for anything in his life. He has his father's eyes, but none of his intelligence. He came up behind me, too close. I could smell his cologne, something expensive and overpowering. Working hard, or hardly working? Kari, he said, and his hand touched my lower back, right above my belt. I stepped away immediately. Don't touch me, Tyler. He laughed like I'd told a joke. Come on, don't be like that. I'm just being friendly. His eyes moved down my body in a way that made my skin crawl. You know, you should smile more. You'd be really pretty if you smiled. I'm not interested in your opinion about my appearance, I said, keeping my voice level even though my heart was pounding. And I asked you not to touch me. His expression changed then. The fake friendliness dropped away, and something ugly took its place. He stepped closer again, backing me against the counter. You know who my dad is, right? You know he owns this company? I'm aware, I said. Then you should be more careful about embarrassing me. About making me feel uncomfortable in my own workplace. He leaned in close enough that I could see the pores on his nose. Be smart, Kari. I ducked under his arm and walked out of that break room so fast I almost ran. My coffee sat forgotten on the counter. I went straight to my supervisor Janet's office. She was on the phone, but I waited, pacing in the hallway until she hung up. Janet, I need to report something, I said. And I told her everything that had just happened. Every word Tyler said, every place he touched me, the way he'd cornered me and threatened me. Janet's face went through several expressions. Concern, then discomfort, then something that looked almost like fear. Okay, she said slowly. Okay, Kari. I'll handle this. Thank you for telling me. What happens now? I asked. I'll take care of it, Janet repeated. Just go back to work. And let me handle it through the proper channels. The next day, Janet wouldn't make eye contact with me. She walked past my desk twice without saying anything. When I tried to ask her about it, she said she was busy and hurried away. And then this morning, I got called to HR. Now I sat at my desk, staring at the evidence of financial fraud on my screen, and something cold and hard settled in my chest. They thought they could do this to me. They thought I would just take it, apologize, keep my head down. They thought I was nobody. That night, alone in my small apartment with my laptop open on the kitchen table, I wrote an email I knew would burn everything down. I took my time with it. I used a VPN service I'd researched carefully. I created an untraceable email account through an encrypted service. I attached every single piece of evidence I'd collected. Scanned invoices showing duplicate payments, bank records I'd accessed through my legitimate work permissions, payment approvals with Brenda's and Douglas's signatures, registration documents for the shell companies that traced back to addresses that didn't exist. The email was addressed to 3 recipients: Douglas, the CFO, Harold, the CEO, and Tyler's father, and the external auditing firm that reviewed our books every quarter. I kept the tone professional, factual, completely devoid of emotion. Dear recipients, I am writing to bring to your attention evidence of fraudulent financial activity within the company requiring immediate investigation. Please find attached documentation of systematic embezzlement through false vendor payments over an 8-month period. The evidence is comprehensive and verifiable. Appropriate authorities should be notified. No signature, no identifying information, just the facts and the attachments. I sat there with my finger hovering over the send button for 10 full minutes. I thought about what would happen when they received this. I thought about the chaos it would cause. I thought about Tyler's smirk and Brenda's cold dismissal and the way Janet had abandoned me. I thought about my reduced paycheck and my rent and the way they'd made me feel small and helpless. At 11:42 at night, I clicked send. The next morning, I woke up at 6:30 from a restless sleep filled with anxious dreams. I checked my phone immediately. No response to the email, but I hadn't expected one. The anonymous account was set to auto-delete anything that came back. I got ready for work with my stomach in knots, choosing my clothes carefully. A simple blue blouse and black pants. Professional. Unremarkable. I arrived at the office at 8:15, my usual time. The moment I walked through the glass doors into the lobby, I knew something was different. The energy in the air felt electric, charged with tension. People were clustered in small groups, heads together, voices low and urgent. I badged through security and headed to my department. Amy practically sprinted over to my desk before I'd even set down my purse. Kari, oh my God, something huge is happening. What do you mean? I asked, hanging my jacket on the back of my chair. I don't know exactly. But the finance department is completely locked down. There's a security guard standing outside their door. Nobody can go in or out. My heart started pounding, but I kept my face neutral. That's weird. Do you know why? No clue. But everyone's freaking out. Brenda's office door has been closed all morning, and people keep going in and out, looking stressed. I turned on my computer and logged in, trying to look calm and focused. Around the office, people were whispering, speculating. I caught fragments of conversations. Something about an emergency. Something about finance. Something about the executives being in crisis mode. Tyler walked past my desk around 9 o'clock. His usual swagger slightly diminished. He looked confused and annoyed, like someone had interrupted his plans. He was heading toward his father's executive suite on the top floor. At 9:30, everything exploded. Douglas came storming through the office like a hurricane. His face was purple, actually purple, with rage or panic, or both. The veins in his neck bulged, and his eyes were wild. He was shouting at his assistant, who was practically running to keep up with him. Tell me that email wasn't real. Tell me someone is playing a sick joke. His assistant, a nervous young man named Peter, stammered something I couldn't hear. Douglas whirled on him. How did they get this information? Who had access to these files? They disappeared into the executive suite. The entire office fell silent for a moment, and then the whispers exploded into full conversations. Email? What email? What information? 20 minutes later, every department head was summoned to an emergency meeting. Janet rushed past, looking pale and frightened. I watched through the glass walls of the conference room as executives filed in, their faces grim. The meeting lasted an hour, and nobody who went in came out smiling. I tried to work. I pulled up invoices and processed them with shaking hands. I responded to vendor emails. I did everything I was supposed to do, but my mind was racing. The external auditors must have forwarded the email to Harold and Douglas immediately. They were probably verifying the evidence right now. They were probably freezing accounts, pulling records, starting the investigation. At noon, a company-wide email hit everyone's inbox simultaneously. All financial transactions are suspended until further notice pending an internal review. All payment processing is halted. No expenses will be approved or reimbursed until the review is complete. Your cooperation is appreciated during this time. The office erupted. People started panicking about expenses they'd already incurred, payments they were expecting, deals that were in progress. Amy turned to me with wide eyes. This is insane. What's going on? I have no idea. I lied. At 12:30, I watched through the window as Brenda walked out of the building carrying a cardboard box filled with personal items from her desk. Her face was blank, emotionless. A security guard escorted her to her car. The rumors spread like wildfire. She was fired. She was suspended. She was being investigated. Nobody knew for sure, but everyone had a theory. I ate lunch at my desk. A sad sandwich from the vending machine that tasted like cardboard. My appetite was gone, but I forced myself to eat anyway. Amy sat with me, theorizing wildly about what was happening. Embezzlement, she guessed. Fraud. Something big with the finances. It has to be really bad if they suspended Brenda, Amy said. She's been here for like 15 years. I just nodded and took another bite of sandwich that I didn't taste. The afternoon brought new developments. 3 people in expensive suits arrived and were escorted to the large conference room. External auditors, someone whispered. They set up computers and stacks of files and started calling people in for interviews. Finance staff, mostly. but also anyone who had access to payment systems. My desk phone rang at 3 o'clock. I stared at it for 2 rings before answering. This is Kari. Miss Kari. This is Susan from the external audit team. We'd like to speak with you tomorrow morning at 9. Please report to conference room B. My mouth went dry. Okay. Can I ask what this is about? Just routine interviews. We're speaking with everyone who works with financial data. Thank you. She hung up before I could respond. I set the phone down carefully and tried to control my breathing. They were going to interview me. They were going to ask questions. They were going to look at my access logs and see that I'd pulled all those files. I'd left digital fingerprints everywhere. The afternoon dragged on. Tyler was called to his father's office around 4. I saw him through the glass walls, gesturing angrily while Harold sat behind his desk, looking older than I'd ever seen him look. At 5 o'clock, I shut down my computer and gathered my things. My hands were still shaking. I walked to the parking lot on unsteady legs, thinking about tomorrow's interview, about what I would say, about whether they could trace the email back to me. I was halfway to my car when I heard footsteps behind me, moving fast. I turned, and there was Tyler. His face flushed and furious. "This is your fault," he said, getting right in my space. "I don't know how, but this is your fault somehow." I took a step back. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play stupid. You complained about me, and now look what's happening. You're trying to destroy this company." "I didn't destroy anything," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And you need to step back." He moved closer instead. "My family built this company. My father has given his life to it. And now some little nobody is trying to tear it all down because I was nice to her in the break room and she couldn't handle it. Nice to me. That's what he was calling it." Rage flared hot in my chest, but I swallowed it down. "Move out of my way, Tyler." He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. "You have no idea what my family can do to you. No idea. We will bury you." I yanked my arm free, my heart hammering. "Don't ever touch me again." I walked quickly to my car, got in, locked the doors. Tyler stood in the parking lot watching me with an expression that sent ice down my spine. I drove away, checking my rearview mirror every few seconds, half expecting to see him following me. At home, I deadbolted the door and checked all the windows. I sat on my couch, shaking, adrenaline still flooding my system. I'd thought exposing the fraud would solve everything. I'd thought justice would be simple. I had no idea I'd just painted a target on my back. I barely slept that night. Every sound in my apartment building made me jump. I kept thinking about Tyler's face in the parking lot, the way he'd grabbed me, the threat in his voice. At 6 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and got in the shower. I dressed carefully for the audit interview. Navy pants, white button-down shirt, minimal jewelry. I wanted to look professional, competent, trustworthy. I practiced answers in the mirror. Yes, I work in accounts payable. Yes, I process vendor payments. Yes, I noticed some irregularities. No, I don't know who sent that email. I arrived at the office at 8:30, 30 minutes early. The conference room door was closed, but I could see movement inside through the frosted glass. At exactly 9 o'clock, the door opened, and a woman in her late 40s stepped out. She had sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and a smile that didn't reach those eyes. "Kari? I'm Susan. Please come in." The conference room had been transformed into a makeshift investigation headquarters. Laptops, file boxes, stacks of printed documents. Susan gestured to a chair across from her at the long table. "Thank you for meeting with me," she said, pulling out a legal pad and pen. "This shouldn't take too long. I just have some questions about your role here and your familiarity with the company's financial systems." "Of course," I said, folding my hands in my lap to keep them from shaking. The first questions were easy. How long had I worked there? 3 years. What were my responsibilities? Processing accounts payable, vendor management, invoice verification. Who did I report to? Janet. Then Susan leaned back in her chair, studying me. Have you noticed any unusual financial activity during your time here? I'd prepared for this. I've occasionally noticed discrepancies in vendor files, duplicate invoices, things like that. I usually flag them for Janet to review. Duplicate invoices, Susan repeated, making a note. Did you ever follow up on those flags? Sometimes. It's part of good accounting practice. To verify payment accuracy. Do you have access to the vendor payment system? Yes, it's required for my job. Susan tapped her pen against her legal pad. Have you ever accessed files outside your normal scope of responsibility? My stomach clenched. There it was. I sometimes cross-reference data between departments to ensure accuracy. If I see a payment that seems unusual, I might check it against other records. How often would you say you do that? It depends. Maybe once or twice a week if something catches my attention. Susan made another note, her expression unreadable. And, in the past month, would you say you accessed files more frequently than usual? I met her eyes directly. I've been particularly diligent about accuracy lately. There seem to be more irregularities than normal. I see. She wrote something else. One last question, Kari. Do you know anything about an anonymous email that was sent to the executive team in our firm? No, I said. I heard people talking about an email, but I don't know anything about it. Susan studied me for a long moment. Then she smiled that cold smile again. Thank you for your time. We'll be in touch if we need anything else. I walked out of that conference room feeling like I'd just run a marathon. My shirt was damp with sweat under my blazer. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face, staring at my reflection in the mirror. Had I been convincing? Could she tell I was lying? At noon, Janet called me into her office. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept either. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and there were dark circles under her eyes. Close the door, she said. I did, and sat in the chair across from her desk. Janet folded her hands on top of a stack of papers and looked at me directly for the first time in days. Kari, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay, I said carefully. Did you send that anonymous email? My heart stopped. No, because Douglas is telling Harold that someone in accounts payable had to have been involved. He's saying the fraud allegations are fabricated, that someone is trying to frame him. And your name came up. My name? Why? Janet pulled out a printed document. These are system access logs. They show that you pulled a significant number of files over the past 3 weeks. Files that were referenced in the anonymous email. I could feel the walls closing in. I pull files all the time. It's my job to verify payments and reconcile accounts. You know that. I know, Janet said. And she actually looked sympathetic. I believe you. But I'm not the one you need to convince. They're looking at everyone who had access, and you accessed more files than anyone else in the department. Because I do my job thoroughly, I said, hearing the edge of desperation in my own voice. Janet sighed. Look, I'm telling you this as a warning. Be prepared. They're going to dig into everything. I stood up to leave, then turned back. Janet, did you tell HR about what I reported to you? About Tyler? Her face went carefully blank. What do you mean? 2 days ago, I came to you about Tyler harassing me in the break room. About him threatening me. Did you report that to HR like you said you would? Kari, I don't remember any such conversation. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. You don't remember? No. And I'd be careful about making accusations you can't prove. I walked out of her office feeling numb. She'd thrown me under the bus to protect herself. Of course she had. At 3 o'clock, I was called back to HR. Not Brenda's old office, but a different conference room. A man I'd never seen before sat waiting for me. He was in his 50s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His nameplate read, Glenn Martinez, Corporate HR. Miss Kari, please sit down. I sat, my hands gripping the armrests. I'll get right to the point. We're placing you on administrative leave effective immediately, pending the outcome of the investigation. What? Why? There are serious questions about your access to confidential files. Questions about your relationship with the parties implicated in the alleged fraud. I don't have a relationship with them. I reported harassment, and this is retaliation. Glenn looked down at a file in front of him. That's interesting, because there's no record of any harassment report in your file. My blood ran cold. I reported it to Janet. She told me she'd handle it through proper channels. I've spoken with Janet. She has no recollection of any such conversation. She's lying, I said, my voice rising. I told her everything. Tyler cornered me in the break room. He touched me. He threatened me. Glenn held up a hand. These are serious allegations, but without documentation or corroboration, they're just allegations. So you're punishing me instead? We're not punishing anyone. We're conducting a thorough investigation. Until it's complete, we need your badge, your laptop, and your building access card. I sat there stunned while he slid a form across the table. Inventory of company property. I signed it with a hand that didn't feel like mine anymore. I handed over my badge, my laptop, my access card, everything that connected me to this place. You'll continue to receive pay during the leave, Glenn said. But you're not to contact any employees or come to the building. Our legal team will be in touch. I walked out of that building like a zombie. People stared as I passed. Amy caught my eye and mouthed, "What happened?" But I couldn't stop to explain. I just kept walking to my car, got in, and sat there in the parking lot trying to process what had just occurred. They were setting me up. Douglas and Brenda were flipping the script, making me look like the criminal. My harassment complaint had vanished. Janet had betrayed me. I was on administrative leave with a fraud investigation hanging over my head. At home, I collapsed on my couch and stared at the ceiling. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered, without thinking. Miss Carey? This is David Walsh. I'm an attorney representing the company. My stomach dropped. What do you want? We need to discuss your cooperation with the ongoing investigation. Depending on what the audit reveals, there may be criminal charges. Criminal charges? Against me? I haven't done anything wrong, I said. That's for the investigation to determine. I'm calling as a courtesy to let you know the seriousness of the situation. You may want to retain counsel. I hung up on him. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I pulled up my backup files, the ones I'd saved to my encrypted cloud drive. All the evidence of the real fraud. But how did I prove I hadn't participated in it? How did I prove I was the whistleblower, not the criminal? They were going to destroy me and call it justice. I had 72 hours before the initial investigation concluded, and I had to do something drastic. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, researching whistleblower protection laws. What I found made my heart sink. To be protected as a whistleblower, you had to file officially with government agencies. Anonymous tips didn't count. I'd exposed the fraud, but I had no legal shield. At 3 a.m, I started drafting a formal complaint. This time, with my real name attached. I documented everything. The fraud I'd discovered. The harassment from Tyler. The retaliation when I reported it. Brenda docking my pay. Janet erasing my complaint. Being placed on administrative leave and threatened with criminal charges. I included copies of all my evidence. I found the websites for the agencies I needed to contact. State Labor Board. Department of Financial Regulation, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. I would file with all of them. No more anonymity. No more hiding. If they were going to destroy me anyway, I was going to make sure the truth was on record. But I needed more evidence. I needed proof that my harassment complaint had existed before Janet deleted it. I needed proof of the conspiracy to frame me. At 8 in the morning, I sent a careful text to Marcus, a friend in the IT department. We'd been friendly since I started at the company, bonding over a shared love of terrible action movies. Can we meet for coffee? He responded 20 minutes later. Everything okay? Need to talk. Can you meet me this afternoon? Sure. How about that diner on 5th Street? 2 o'clock? Perfect. Thank you. I spent the morning finishing my official complaints. I wrote everything out in excruciating detail, attaching documentation, time-stamping every incident. My hand hovered over the submit button for each one. Once I filed these, there was no going back. My name would be officially attached. Everyone would know I was the whistleblower. I clicked submit on all 3 at 11:30 in the morning. Confirmations came back immediately. Complaints received. Case numbers assigned. The wheels of bureaucratic justice were finally turning. At 2 o'clock, I sat in a booth at the back of the diner watching the door. Marcus came in right on time, tall and lanky in his usual band t-shirt and jeans. He slid into the booth across from me. So what's this about? You sounded stressed. I looked around to make sure nobody was close enough to hear, then told him everything. The harassment, the fraud, the retaliation, the investigation that was being twisted against me. Marcus's expression went from concerned to shocked to angry. They deleted your harassment report from the system? Janet says she doesn't remember me reporting anything, but I know I did. If someone could look at the server logs, they'd show that a report was filed and then removed. Marcus rubbed his jaw. That's a big ask, Kari. If they catch me accessing those logs, I could lose my job. I know, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked. I started to gather my things. Wait. Marcus reached across the table and grabbed my hand. I didn't say no. What they're doing to you is wrong. Let me see what I can do. Marcus, I can't let you risk your job for this. Too late. I'm already in. Give me until tonight. That night, my phone rang at 10:30. Marcus, I found it, he said without preamble. Your harassment complaint was filed in the HR system 3 days ago at 2:17 in the afternoon. 48 hours later, it was deleted using Janet's administrative credentials. Relief and vindication flooded through me. Can you send me proof? Already did. Check your email. I sent screenshots of the logs to that encrypted email you gave me. I pulled up my laptop and found his email. The evidence was right there. Timestamps, user credentials, proof that my complaint had existed and been deliberately erased. There's more, Marcus said. I also found emails between Douglas, Brenda, and Harold. Internal company emails, not external. They knew about the fraud. They were all in on it. What? It's a whole email chain going back months. They were discussing how to cover it up, if anyone noticed. And after the anonymous email went out, there's a thread about blaming a disgruntled employee. They actually used those words. They planned to pin this on someone. Can you send those too? Sending now. The emails came through. I read them with growing horror. They'd known. They'd all known about the embezzlement. They'd participated in it, and when they got caught, they'd immediately strategized about finding a scapegoat. The Tyler harassment incident had given them a perfect target. Me. Marcus, thank you. Seriously, thank you. Just promise me you'll nail these people. I will. The next morning, I filed supplemental complaints with all 3 agencies. I included Marcus's evidence. The deleted harassment report. The emails proving conspiracy. Everything was now officially on record with government investigators. For the first time in days, I felt powerful. I had proof. I had a paper trail. I'd done everything right. That afternoon, my phone rang. My landlord. Kari, I received a concerning phone call about you this morning. My stomach clenched. What kind of call? Someone claiming to be from your employer. They said there's a criminal investigation, that you might not be able to pay rent. I'm going to need next month's rent early, plus an additional security deposit. $2,000 total by Friday. I can't afford that. I'm on reduced pay. Then I'm afraid I'll need to start eviction proceedings. I can't risk having a tenant who might not pay. This is illegal. You can't evict me without cause. Non-payment is cause. I'll see you Friday, Kari. He hung up. I stared at my phone in disbelief. They were attacking my housing now. An hour later, an email from my student loan servicer appeared. My employment verification had been flagged. My loans were being moved to immediate repayment status. Instead of $200 a month, they wanted $3,000 immediately. Then my credit card company. Fraud alert on my account. Multiple attempts to open new cards in my name. My credit was being attacked. My phone rang again. My mother. Carrie? Honey, someone called me asking about you. They said you were in legal trouble? I tried to explain. But how could I make her understand? My mother had always told me to keep my head down, not make waves. Now I was drowning in waves I'd created. Mom, it's complicated, but I'm okay. Are you sure? You sound terrible. Do you need money? Do you need to come home? I'm fine, I have to go. I hung up before she could hear me cry. That night, Marcus called again. His voice was tight with stress. They know someone accessed those files. Its security flagged my access. I'm being called in tomorrow for questioning. Guilt crashed over me. Marcus, I'm so sorry. Don't be. I knew the risks. But Kari, you need to be careful. I heard Tyler talking to his dad in the hallway today. He mentioned your address. Fear shot through me like electricity. What did he say? I couldn't hear everything, but it sounded like a threat. Make sure your doors are locked. Maybe stay with a friend for a few days. After we hung up, I checked every lock in my apartment twice. I pushed a chair against the door. I kept my phone next to my bed with 911 already dialed, my thumb hovering over the call button. I thought I was fighting a company. I didn't realize I was fighting a family empire that had been crushing people like me for decades, and they had playbooks for this. 3 days passed in a blur of anxiety and deteriorating circumstances. The agencies investigating my complaints sent identical responses. They were opening investigations, but these things took time. 60 to 90 days for initial reviews. I couldn't survive that long. I spent hours each day applying for jobs. I sent my resume to 30 companies in 3 days. Every single one called the same reference number. The corporate HR line at my former employer. Every single one came back with a rejection. Some were kind about it, citing other qualified candidates. Some just never responded. One hiring manager was honest enough to tell me that my reference check had raised red flags. I was being blacklisted, systematically shut out of my entire industry. On the 4th day of my administrative leave, Marcus texted me. Suspended without pay. Under investigation for unauthorized system access. They're talking about legal action. Who? I stared at that message until my vision blurred. This was my fault. He'd helped me, and now he was paying the price. That same afternoon, a certified letter arrived. I signed for it with shaking hands and opened it at my kitchen table. It was thick, officially printed on law firm letterhead. A lawsuit, civil complaint filed by the company against me personally. They were suing me for defamation and theft of proprietary information. They claimed my fraud allegations were false and malicious. They claimed I'd stolen confidential files for personal gain. They were seeking $500,000 in damages. $500,000. I had $300 in my bank account. I called legal aid services. The earliest appointment was in 8 weeks. I explained it was urgent. They told me everyone's case was urgent. I could come to a walk-in clinic on Wednesday mornings, but there was usually a 3 to 4 hour wait and no guarantee of service. I was functionally alone against corporate attorneys with unlimited resources. The next blow came from an unexpected direction. The local business newspaper ran a story on their website. Local company faces embezzlement accusations. The article was carefully worded, probably to avoid libel. It mentioned the investigation, the frozen accounts, the executive resignations, and buried in the 7th paragraph, a single line. Sources say an employee currently under investigation may have been involved in the scheme. They didn't name me, but they didn't have to. Anyone who worked at the company would know. Anyone who knew me would know. My phone started ringing. Former coworkers, some offering support, most just fishing for gossip. I stopped answering. Amy left a voicemail. Kari, I don't know what to believe anymore. Everyone's saying things. Call me back. I didn't call her back. My professional reputation, built over 3 years of good work, was destroyed in a single news cycle. On Friday, exactly a week after this nightmare began, I came home from a fruitless job interview to find my apartment door slightly open. Not broken, not forced, just open, like someone had been inside and hadn't pulled it quite shut when they left. I backed away immediately and called 911. The police arrived within 10 minutes. 2 officers, a man and a woman, both professional and thorough. They searched my apartment while I waited in the hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs. Nobody's inside, the male officer said, emerging from my bedroom. But you're right. It looks like someone was here. How can you tell? Your laptop was moved. See the dust pattern on your desk? It's been shifted. Papers have been gone through. Things are just slightly out of place. You said your lock wasn't broken? No, it was just open. Do you know anyone who has a key? Just the landlord. They filed a report. They took photos. They gave me a case number. But there was nothing they could really do. No evidence of forced entry. Nothing stolen. No way to prove who'd been inside. The message was clear, though. They could reach me anywhere. I wasn't safe, even in my own home. That night I didn't sleep at all. Every sound made me jump. Every car that passed on the street outside sent adrenaline flooding through my system. I kept checking the door lock. Over and over. Saturday morning, my landlord called. Kari, it's past Friday. I need that payment. I don't have it. You know I don't have it. Then I'm filing eviction paperwork on Monday. You'll have 30 days. 30 days. In 30 days I'd be homeless. Unless I could find $2,000 I didn't have and had no way to get. I went to the food bank that afternoon. I'd never been to a food bank before. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at the entrance, before I could make myself go inside. The people there were kind. They gave me a box of canned goods, some pasta, bread that was 2 days from expiring. I loaded it into my trunk and sat back in my car and cried. When I got home, there was an email waiting. From an address I didn't recognize. No name attached. Subject line, I know what they did to you. I almost deleted it as spam, but something made me click. I'm a former employee. They did the same thing to me 5 years ago. I have information that can help, but we need to meet in person. I can't risk electronic communication. Tomorrow, 2 in the afternoon, public library downtown, 2nd floor reading room. I'll find you. A friend. I read the email 3 times. It could be a trap. It could be someone from the company trying to gather evidence against me. It could be anything, but I was out of options. Every official channel was moving too slowly. Every legal path required resources I didn't have. The company was systematically destroying my life, piece by piece. I needed something to change the game. I lay awake that night weighing my choices. Meeting this person was risky, but doing nothing was certain doom. At 3 a.m, I made my decision. I would go. I walked into that library the next day knowing it might be a trap. I was right, but not in the way I expected. Sunday afternoon, I arrived at the downtown library 20 minutes early. The building was old, beautiful, built in the 1920s with high ceilings and tall windows. I took the stairs to the second floor, passing families and students and elderly people reading newspapers. The reading room was quiet, lined with wooden tables and comfortable chairs. I chose a table near the emergency exit with a clear view of the entrance. My hands were shaking slightly, so I folded them in my lap. I dressed carefully in jeans and a sweater, trying to look casual, unthreatening. My phone was in my pocket with the recording app ready, just in case. At 2 o'clock exactly, a woman approached my table. She was in her mid-40s, dressed in business casual, with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her face was kind, but her eyes were sharp, assessing. "Kari," she said quietly. I nodded. She sat down across from me and extended her hand. "Patricia, thank you for coming. I know you're taking a risk." Her handshake was firm, confident. She pulled a notebook from her bag and set it on the table between us, but didn't open it yet. "Tell me what you're thinking right now," she said. "You're wondering if this is a trap, if I'm working for them." "Yes," I admitted. "Smart. I would be too." She pulled out her driver's license and slid it across the table. "That's my real name, Patricia Chen. You can verify everything I'm about to tell you." I looked at the license, memorizing the name and address. Patricia leaned forward, her voice dropping even lower. "I worked at that company 8 years ago. I was a senior accountant in the finance department. I discovered the same fraud you found, maybe an earlier version of it. I reported it internally, like you did." My heart started beating faster. "What happened?" "They destroyed me. Exactly the way they're destroying you. I was accused of participating in the fraud. I was suspended, investigated, sued. My harassment complaint disappeared. I lost my job, my reputation. My marriage fell apart from the stress. It took me 4 years to rebuild my life." "But you kept evidence?" She nodded. "I kept everything. Every document, every email, every piece of proof. Because I knew someday someone else would fight back, and I wanted to be ready to help them." Patricia opened her notebook. Inside was a flash drive. "This has 8 years of documentation. It shows fraud dating back over a decade. It shows multiple employees destroyed the same way you're being destroyed. There's a pattern. It's not isolated incidents. It's a system." She pulled out printed documents, spreading them across the table. Financial records, email chains, legal settlements with non-disclosure agreements. "Tyler has done this before, to other women. They pay them off, make them sign NDAs, and bury it. Douglas and Brenda have been running this embezzlement scheme for years. Harold knows everything and protects them because Douglas is his brother-in-law and Brenda has dirt on him." I stared at the documents, my mind reeling. This was so much bigger than I'd realized. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. "Because I couldn't fight back alone. I didn't have the strength or the resources. But you're already fighting. You've already filed official complaints. And if we combine our evidence, if we go public together, we can bring them down." "Go public how?" "I have a contact. An investigative journalist named Lauren, who works for the Sentinel. She's been trying to crack this story for 2 years, but hasn't had sources willing to go on record. If you and I both agree to be interviewed, to let her publish our names and our stories, with all this evidence to back it up, it becomes undeniable." I thought about what that would mean. My name in the newspaper. My story public forever. No chance of a quiet settlement or fading into anonymity. They've already destroyed me, I said slowly. What more can they do? Exactly. Patricia smiled grimly. They took everything. Now you burn it all down. I looked at the evidence spread across the table. 8 years of corruption. Multiple victims. A pattern of abuse and retaliation spanning a decade. And suddenly I understood. This wasn't just about me. It was about every person they'd crushed before me. And every person they would crush after me, if someone didn't stop them. I'm in, I said. Patricia made a phone call right there in the library. 20 minutes later, we were in Lauren's office at the Sentinel newspaper. Lauren was in her 30s, sharp-eyed and intense, with a reputation for investigative journalism that had won awards. She listened to both our stories. She examined Patricia's evidence with meticulous care, asking pointed questions, verifying details. She looked at my documentation, my official complaints, the timeline of retaliation. After 3 hours, she sat back in her chair. This is the story. This is what I've been looking for. Company executives running a decade-long embezzlement scheme, using intimidation and retaliation to silence whistleblowers. Pattern of sexual harassment covered up with settlements. Systematic destruction of employees who speak out. When can you publish? Patricia asked. I need 48 hours to verify everything. Get legal clearance. Reach out to the company for comment. The story will run front page Sunday edition. Online Saturday night at midnight. Lauren looked at both of us seriously. Once this publishes, there's no going back. Your names will be public. You'll face backlash. Are you both prepared for that? Patricia and I looked at each other. We'd both already lost so much. What was left to lose? Yes, we said together. The next 2 days were torture. I jumped every time my phone rang. Wednesday afternoon, David Walsh called again. Kari, we're prepared to make you an offer. $50,000. You sign a non-disclosure agreement. You drop all your complaints. And we drop the lawsuit. Take it or we proceed with litigation. They knew something was coming. They were trying to silence me before it hit. No, I said. Excuse me? I said no. I'm not signing anything. You're making a terrible mistake. Do you have any idea how much a legal defense will cost you? We will bury you in legal fees. You'll be bankrupt before this even goes to trial. Then I'll be bankrupt. But I won't be silenced. I hung up on him. My hands were shaking, but I felt powerful for the first time in weeks. Saturday night. I sat at my laptop with Patricia on video chat. At 11:59, we refreshed the Sentinel's website. At midnight, the story went live. The headline was devastating. Corporate culture of corruption. How one family business destroys whistleblowers. The article was long, detailed, impeccably sourced. It told Patricia's story and mine. It documented the embezzlement scheme with hard numbers and evidence. It laid out Tyler's history with multiple women, including their settlement amounts. It showed the pattern of retaliation spanning a decade. It included quotes from 3 other former employees Patricia had found who'd been willing to speak anonymously. The company had declined to comment, which the article noted made them appear guilty. By Sunday morning, the story had been shared thousands of times on social media. Local TV news picked it up. The state attorney general's office released a statement announcing they were opening an investigation. Federal agencies issued similar statements. The company's stock, which I hadn't even known was publicly traded, dropped 30%. My phone exploded with calls and texts. Interview requests from news stations. Messages of support from people I'd never met. A few angry messages from people who still worked at the company, blaming me for destroying their employer. At noon, the board of directors called an emergency meeting. By 2 o'clock, there was a press conference. Harold stood at a podium looking 20 years older. flanked by grim-faced attorneys. After careful consideration, I am announcing my resignation as CEO. Effective immediately. Douglas and Brenda have also tendered their resignations. We take full responsibility for the failures of oversight that allowed these issues to occur, and we commit to full cooperation with all investigations. Tyler wasn't mentioned. Tyler wasn't at the press conference. But rumors were already spreading that he'd been quietly sent out of state. Victory felt close, intoxicating. But I knew it wasn't over yet. That afternoon, my doorbell rang insistently. I looked through the peephole and saw Tyler. My blood ran cold. He was pacing on my doorstep, agitated, his face flushed. I didn't open the door. Instead, I called 911. This is Kari at apartment 3B. The man who has been harassing me is at my door right now, and I feel threatened. Officers are on their way. Stay on the line. Tyler started shouting through the door. I know you're in there. You destroyed my family. You destroyed everything. Sir, the police are coming. I called through the door, my voice shaking. You need to leave. Not until you talk to me. You owe me that. The police arrived in under 5 minutes. Through the peephole, I watched 2 officers approach Tyler on my doorstep. He was still shouting, gesturing wildly. The officers separated him from my door, spoke to him calmly. I heard him claiming he just wanted to talk, that I was lying about him, that I'd ruined his life. One officer came to my door. I opened it, with the chain still engaged. Ma'am, are you all right? Yes, but I want him away from here. He's been threatening me. We're going to remove him from the premises. We recognize this case from the news. Would you like to file for a restraining order? Yes. Absolutely yes. They took my statement right there. They photographed my doorway where Tyler had been standing, documented everything he'd said. They gave me paperwork for an emergency restraining order. Tyler was escorted to his car. Before he drove away, he looked back at my apartment with an expression that made my skin crawl. The week after the article published was chaos. Tyler was arrested on multiple charges: harassment and stalking charges from me and 2 other women who came forward after reading the story. Douglas and Brenda were charged with embezzlement and fraud. Harold faced civil lawsuits from shareholders. The company announced complete restructuring. The board brought in interim management from outside. They offered settlements to all identified victims of retaliation. No NDAs this time, just compensation for what had been taken from us. Marcus was reinstated with full back pay and a promotion to IT security director. He called me to share the news, his voice lighter than I'd heard it in weeks. They apologized, Kari. The new management actually apologized to me. Said I'd been protecting the company by helping expose the fraud. You deserved that promotion anyway, I told him. Janet was fired for obstruction and falsifying records. I felt no satisfaction in that. Just sadness that she'd chosen to protect herself instead of doing the right thing. The settlement offer came 2 weeks after publication. $250,000. Enough to pay off my student loans, cover my legal fees, rebuild my savings, and start over. I accepted it. Patricia accepted hers. We both could finally breathe again. A competing company reached out to me with a job offer. They'd seen the news coverage and wanted someone with my integrity and attention to detail. The position was better than my old job, with better pay and actual protections for employees who raised concerns. I moved to a new apartment in a better neighborhood. Fresh start. New space where Tyler had never been. I installed better locks and a security system, but mostly I felt safe again. My mother called to tell me she was proud of me. That conversation made me cry more than anything else had through this whole ordeal. Patricia and I became real friends. We met for coffee every week, and she introduced me to a support group for whistleblowers. People who understood what we'd been through, because they'd lived it too. We started volunteering together, helping others navigate the system we'd barely survived. 6 months after everything began, I sat in a courtroom watching Douglas and Brenda's trial. They'd both pleaded guilty to avoid longer sentences, but the judge still wanted impact statements from victims. Patricia went first, her voice steady and strong. Then it was my turn. I walked to the front of the courtroom and looked at Douglas and Brenda. They wouldn't meet my eyes. I told the judge about discovering the fraud, about reporting harassment and being punished for it, about having my life systematically dismantled because I'd told the truth. They thought I was nobody, I said. They thought they could crush me and I'd just disappear. But speaking up wasn't just about me. It was about every person they'd hurt before and every person they would have hurt after if someone didn't stop them. My voice mattered. The truth mattered. The judge sentenced them each to 4 years in federal prison. Harold received probation and massive fines in a separate civil case. Tyler was convicted of harassment and assault, sentenced to 2 years with mandatory counseling. Walking out of that courthouse into the afternoon sunshine, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Patricia was waiting for me on the steps. We went for coffee at our usual place, a little cafe 3 blocks from the courthouse. We sat by the window, watching people pass by on the sidewalk, living their normal lives. "Do you ever regret it?" Patricia asked. Speaking up. I mean, even knowing what it cost. I thought about it. About the fear, the financial devastation, the nights I couldn't sleep. About almost losing everything. But then I thought about Marcus getting promoted. About the other women who'd come forward and gotten justice. About the company being forced to change. About sleeping peacefully now without fear. "No," I said. "I don't regret it. Silence would have cost more in the end. It would have cost my soul." Patricia smiled. "That's what I think too. Standing up to injustice had cost me everything at first. My job, my savings, my sense of safety, nearly my sanity. But silence would have cost something more valuable, my integrity and self-respect. The system is slow and often feels broken, but it can work when you persist, when you document everything, when you follow the rules, when you refuse to be silenced, no matter how hard they try to break you. I learned that you can't fight alone. Allies appear when you show courage. Patricia found me. Marcus risked his job for me. Lauren told our story. The system has to change. And it only changes when people like us refuse to accept corruption as normal. Powerful people seem untouchable until they're not. They count on silence, on fear, on victims being too exhausted or too scared to fight back. But when you shine a light on darkness, when you refuse to let injustice hide, even the most powerful people can fall. My voice mattered. My evidence mattered. Speaking up saved others from the same fate. The women who came forward after me deserved justice too, and they got it because someone went first. I'm not the same person who walked into that HR office all those months ago. I'm stronger now, wiser, harder to break. I understand the cost of truth-telling, but I also understand its value. I sleep better now than I ever did when I was silent. A year after it all began, I testified at a state legislative hearing about whistleblower protections. They were proposing new laws to protect employees who report fraud and harassment. I told them my story, and Patricia told hers. 2 months later, the law passed. Every person who reports misconduct after us will have better protections because we fought. That matters more than anything else. I still work in accounting. I still process invoices and verify payments. But now when I see something wrong, I'm not afraid to speak up. And my company has policies that actually protect people who raise concerns. Tyler tried to contact me once, after he got out of prison. A letter forwarded through his lawyer. He wanted to apologize, he said. To make amends. I threw it away without reading past the first paragraph. Some people deserve forgiveness, but some people just deserve to be forgotten. Life isn't perfect now, I still have moments of anxiety, still check my locks more often than necessary, still have bad dreams sometimes. Trauma doesn't just disappear because you won, but I also have peace. Real peace. Knowing I did the right thing. Knowing I helped others. Knowing I didn't let them break me. The most important thing I learned is that fighting for justice isn't just about personal victory. It's about making sure the next person doesn't have to fight alone. It's about creating a world where speaking up isn't an act of career suicide. It's about being the person you needed when you were at your lowest point. Have you ever faced a situation where speaking up felt impossible but staying silent felt worse? How did you find the courage to do the right thing, even when it cost you everything? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about ordinary people finding extraordinary courage. And share this with someone who needs to hear that their voice matters, that standing up to injustice is worth it, even when it's hard. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it gives you courage when you need it most. Remember, you're stronger than you think, and you're never as alone as you feel. Stay strong, stay honest, and never stop fighting for what's right.